Hello from the MEYLE workshop. Today we're going to show you how to change the transmission oil on an Audi A, specifically a so-called CVT transmission. The internal code for this at Audi is AW. There's already been a lot reported about this online, but not everything has been covered yet. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, all those little details. And I still remember, since I'm from a bit of an older generation myself. Do you remember the Audi commercial with Elvis?
Yeah, of course. I still remember that one.
Really funny.
The one that stood on the dashboard and wobbled every time you shifted gears.
Yeah, exactly. You always wanted to have one of those things.
There was another one where the two kids would imitate their dad's cars, shifting gears. Yeah, right, I guess.
Right. And the other one goes, listen to my car, or that's what my dad's car sounds like. And then he just keeps going and won't stop.
Yeah, exactly, that's right. But I was still pretty little back when that was on TV. Me too. And today, as you said, you already mentioned it, we're talking about CVT transmissions, which stands for continuous variable transmission. And that's a bit different from a conventional torque converter automatic or a dual clutch transmission, because as the name suggests, we have a continuously variable transmission. You have to imagine it like this. There are two cones inside, connected by a chain, and depending on how the cones are positioned relative to each other, the path of the chain changes, and that's how the gear ratio is created. It's a really nice thing, because especially with combustion engines, as we all know, there's a certain RPM range where we have the best efficiency, and that's exactly where we want to be when driving. With this kind of transmission, you can achieve that very well. Of course, there were also some issues.
Yes, there were issues. So Audi discontinued the entire transmission, and later it was replaced by the S-tronic transmission. Exactly, right?
Dual clutch.
Exactly. That means it's no longer produced in series at all. So because of that. So what are you doing now? Well, you have to say there is a bypass filter and there is a main flow filter. The main flow filter, like in some other transmissions and also in the DSG transmission, so the classic VW transmission, is located inside and you can't get to it at all.
No, for that the entire transmission has to be removed
and disassembled.
We're almost talking about a full overhaul job here. So, just for the oil service we're doing today, we're replacing the line filter, which is absolutely sufficient, especially for this kind of service work. Of course, another very important point here is that we're changing the oil, because Michael, as you know yourself, the quality of the oil has a huge impact on the lifespan of the transmission to get rid of the wear as well.
Definitely they wear out. We've talked about this often enough, and that's why the interval is also relatively short. Yes.
So you really should change the oil every few kilometers. You'll see today it's very easy to do.
You can find it on our interval list on our homepage. Okay, and you've cleared a bit of space here to get to the filter.
Exactly, that's right. I've temporarily moved the wiring up here so that later on we can easily reach the filter from above and pull it out upwards.
All right, let's take a look at the kit.
Exactly, today we'll do a classic unboxing.
Nicely put.
And yes, as with all of our kits, you have all the mounting materials and of course the oil included.
The essential oil specifically designed for a CVT transmission. The line filter here. You can probably say a bit more about that, I think. And the mounting hardware, of course. 3 mounting screws.
Exactly. These are the ones that will later be used to attach the filter, because as you can see, they're self-locking, and we also have the screw for the lines that go onto the filter, plus the 2 O-rings for the lines, because those absolutely need to be replaced to ensure the whole process is done professionally. If you take a look at the filter here, it's sealed down here with the sealing lip, and there are also 2 extra pipe rings that sit at the bottom inside the transmission. But those are already on the filter, so you don't need to worry about them. Everything works perfectly.
So especially since you just mentioned it, always pay attention to the quality of the parts. That's really important. We've brought along an aftermarket part here. With us, of course, all parts are subject to a certain quality control. And here we can already see, let's zoom in, that this is the seal, and it definitely doesn't hold.
It's recessed so that it fits directly under the borehole. But we actually need to go under the borehole, not around it. And that's why the quality we deliver here is ultimately what makes all the difference.
Exactly. So that's just another indication that we really examine everything on the filter and, of course, make improvements wherever possible. But always keep an eye on that. Okay, then let's get started, shall we?
Yes, I'd say let's begin. All right, we've now lifted the vehicle, removed the soundproofing covers, and now you can get a great view of the drain plug, which we'll be removing in a moment. Here's a little tip. In this model, we have a single drain plug, but with older generations, there are usually 2. 1 drain plug and 1 inspection plug. They're often extremely tight, and this is something you should definitely be aware of. So please carefully check beforehand whether you are able to open the drain plug or alternatively the fill plug. If you find that you cannot open either one, it is important to address that issue before proceeding any further. Otherwise, if everything is accessible and ready, let's go ahead and open the screw now. This particular one, in this case, came loose very easily without any significant resistance or difficulty. All right, now we'll wait a moment. You'll soon notice that not much oil actually comes out. And that's simply because, just like with many other transmissions, we have a so-called oil level tube installed, which we first have to remove in order to drain the maximum amount of oil. We have now removed the oil level tube. Here you can see it. And of course, we'll replace it later. And it's really simple. You just get yourself a hook, make sure, well, there is a special tool for this, but you can also just bend a small piece of wire, deburr it with a lighter, and then you can easily pull it out. The oil has now completely drained, so we can reinstall the oil level tube. For that, we'll lubricate the sealing ring a bit, and here's a little tip from me. Get yourself a small extension. It fits perfectly onto the bottom of the oil level tube, and then you can easily push it back in from above. There you go, done. Yes, we're done down here for now. Accordingly, I'll go ahead and close up the oil drain opening again for now. To properly remove the lines that go from the filter to the oil cooler, I recommend that you disconnect the line down here so you can remove it properly up top. Down here you can see the line filter, and yes, that's where the oil lines are attached, which we need to remove. Then the three outer screws, they're Torx, those all need to be removed as well, and then the filter can be pulled out upwards. And that's what we're going to do now. So, I've now carefully loosened the line and the filter. The screws usually come out pretty easily, although it can sometimes be a bit fiddly. But now we'll gently pull the filter out upwards. It's best to have a rag handy, because a bit of oil will come out, and there we have it. Once we've removed the old filter, of course we can install the new one. Just don't forget to lightly grease the O-rings down here, and also the sealing surface, which we talked about at the beginning. Apply a bit of oil to it so it seals properly later on. So we've now put in and tightened the screws for the filter. Just a reminder, the screws should be tightened to 5 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. Here's a tip from me. We don't have much space down there. Get yourself a small Torco wrench, set it to 5 Newton meters, mark the screw afterwards, and then use a small ratchet. This way, you'll have much more room and can turn the screw the full 90 degrees in one go. Of course, don't forget to also replace the O-rings on the lines leading to the oil cooler. It's best to access those from underneath. I've lifted the vehicle up again now. Here's the first one. Now we'll remove the second one as well and replace them so that everything is properly sealed again after we've finished installing the filter up top. Another small tip, when you insert the oil line into the filter, make sure to press it in firmly first so that the O-rings snap into place in the filter before you put the screw on. The screw for the whole thing gets tightened to 20 Newton meters. And after you've tightened it up top, of course, you also need to reattach the line to the holders down here so that everything regains its stability. So now we come to filling the oil, and according to the manufacturer's specifications, it's about 5.5 to 7 liters that are required. Since the whole thing will later be adjusted using our oil dipstick, let's start now with 6 liters, which we will pour into the transmission. I'm going to pre-fill our filling jug now, and as I just mentioned, the transmission is filled from below, and for that we have an adapter here. Of course, for that, we need to carefully open the transmission fill port again, just as we did before. Let's get our adapter, which is also included in our kit that you can now purchase together with our filling jug. Screw the whole thing on, connect the filling jug, and then pump the 6 liters into the transmission.
So how far along are you?
Yes, we've now changed the filter and the oil. Accordingly, we'll now start the startup process. We also need to set the oil temperature, and what's really essential during the very first startup is that the engine speed is immediately increased to 2,500 RPM right after starting in order to bleed the oil pump.
Exactly, that's really important. In fact, it's good to hold it at 2,000 RPM for a bit, because otherwise it draws in air, which means it runs dry, and that can get expensive. Then we'd have a real problem.
It could lead to damage, and that's why we do it.
That's why we're making sure of it now.
Now, of course, we'll shift through all the gears again, holding each for 2 seconds. You can do this about 3 times so that all the solenoid valves are activated. This will bleed the system. And now let's move on to the second point. Of course, in order to set the correct oil level, a specific transmission oil temperature is absolutely required, because just like all other fluids, oil expands at certain temperatures. For this vehicle, the manufacturer specifies a range between 35 and 45 degrees, and for that we have our tester with us, which I'll now use to read out the transmission oil temperature. Our transmission oil temperature is now at 35 degrees, so it's within the target range. Accordingly, we will now remove our filling device, and ideally, some oil should still run out. Very important here, of course, the oil level is checked with the engine running, because if you turn off the vehicle now, all the oil that's currently circulating will flow back down into the pan, and more oil will come out than actually should. That's why it's very important to keep the engine running. That was a bit too little for me, so we're definitely going to add some more now. We've now topped up another liter. Our transmission oil temperature is still in the safe operating range at this point in time, and now we'll check again. Yes, very nice. Now we'll let the oil drain until the oil from the dipstick tube inside is set correctly. That means until it more or less starts bubbling. After the oil has drained out, the transmission can be closed up again. The drain plug gets tightened to 30 Newton meters. Test drive completed. Yes, everything worked out perfectly. I also have to say the transmission shifts as smooth as butter, although we should mention, Misha, that there weren't any issues with this transmission beforehand either. The service was due, so that's why we carried it out today. If problems do arise, an oil change can, of course, work wonders in some cases. But if the wear is already very advanced, then an oil change probably won't help anymore.
Exactly. With this transmission, it's tricky. Maybe you can fix a slight jerk, but that's about it. But anyway, our goal here is simply to carry out a preventive service.
Exactly. It was due.
It was due, so we did it. We showed you how it's done and hope we were able to help you a bit. If you have any questions, feel free to ask anytime. You can also do that on our homepage. See you next time, or